Let's vote things in quick before.
Thank you. Can welcome everyone to this morning's meeting. Can I just advise members that we have Joanne Bunting, who is joining us remotely, and Emma Sheeran, Emily. And we have a quorum. I'd just like to inform all members that mobile devices are permitted, provided they are muted and on airplane mode. Tablets and laptops should only be used for committee business during meetings. Okay. And in relation just to apologies for this morning, Jonathan Buckley is unable to attend this morning, but he has appointed Joanne Bunting as his substitute member for the meeting. And we have an apologies from Kate Nicholl. Okay. So I'm just going to move on to item 2 of the agenda, declaration of members' interests. I'd just like to remind members that they are obliged to declare any relevant financial or other interests. If anyone has any interest to declare, they should do so at the start of the relevant agenda item. Okay. So we're just going to move on now to item 3, which is the draft minutes, and I can just refer members to the draft minutes of procedures at pages 6 to 13 of the meeting pack. I'd just like to ask members, are they content that the draft minutes of the meeting on the 20th of February 2025 are a true reflection of the proceedings? Yes.
Great.
Agreed, yeah, thank you. Just moving on now to item 4 on the agenda, matters arising. I have no matters arising, anyone? No? Okay, so we're just going to swiftly now move on to item 5. The European Commission Work Programme for 2025. Can I refer members to pages 15 to 37 of the meeting pack? And just remind members that obviously the European Commission published its 2025 Work Programme in February, and RAISE was asked to identify anything within it that could potentially be a new or a replacement act. Just to inform members that the British Government has indicated that its explanatory memorandum on the Commission Work Programme is due to be finalised and shared with the committee imminently. So once it is received, this will be included in our pack for our next meeting. Okay. As the explanatory memorandum wasn't received, I'll just remove on then. So I'm just going to refer members now to your RAISE pack, and that's pages 16 to 37 of the meeting pack, and just to inform members that there are 2 research officers from RAISE, Glenda Doherty and Oren O'Connor, and they're here today to brief the committee, so you are very much welcome. I just welcome Glenda and Oren and just invite you to come forward now and ask us to brief the committee.
Thank you very much, Chair, for having us to the committee. And yes, I would like to just introduce our paper on the European Commission Work Programme for 2025, New and Replacement Acts. So I will just be going over a quick brief background of the work programme, while my colleague Glenda will go through the specifics of the paper. The purpose of this paper and presentation is to assist this committee in identifying legislative initiatives and proposals within the European Commission's work programme for 2025 that in the future may constitute either replacement or new acts under the Windsor Framework. This analysis does not evaluate the substance of the legislative files, but serves as an informative tool for the committee's planning for the following year. So on the 12th of February, the Commission published its work programme for that year. This document outlines the key legislative and policy initiatives for 2025. The work programme that was built upon the new Commission's political guidelines was presented in the form of a communication titled Moving Forward Together, a bolder, simpler, faster union. And notably, this is the first work programme of President von der Leyen's second mandate. So just to give you an idea of the structure of the work programme, it's broken down into 5 annexes, each detailing the Commission's legislative and non-legislative intentions. The first annex is in our new initiatives, which outline new proposals and initiatives the Commission intends to bring forward in 2025. The second annex is evaluation and fitness checks. The fitness checks examine how different EU laws, policies and programmes interact, identifying inconsistencies, synergies and their overall impact, and such reviews may result in amendments or reforms to existing EU legislation, including those that are within the Windsor Framework. The third annex is pending proposals. This annex lists legislative proposals from the previous Commission mandate that may remain under consideration and are currently making their way through the legislative process. And finally, Annex 4 and 5 are withdrawals and repeals. Withdrawals refers to the legislative proposals that have been removed from the EU legislative process, whereas repeals involve the formal removal of existing legislation within EU law. So following on from the Commission work programme, the European Parliament, the Council and the Commission will agree on our priority legislative proposals for expediting the process. This is the 2025 Joint Declaration on Legislative Priorities, and we can expect that quite soon. And following on from that as well, the Commission has committed to increasing engagement with Northern Ireland stakeholders. And while we are not prior to this enhanced engagement with Northern Ireland stakeholders, we are aware that the Specialised Committee on the Implementation of the Windsor Framework met on Thursday the 6th of March, and they did discuss this enhanced engagement. So I will now pass you to my colleague Glenda, who can go through the specifics of the annexes of the paper, and then we are happy to take your questions.
Okay, thanks, Oren, and thank you, Chair. So what I'm going to do is talk about our analysis of the EU Commission Work Programme to give you an idea about potential new and replacement acts in the programme which may be relevant to the work of the committee in the next year. And as Oren was saying, then we'll take any questions. So first of all, I'd like to reiterate that this is not a definitive list because limited detail was available for some initiatives. Also, proposals may be amended throughout the EU legislative process. So some of those proposals identified may subsequently not go on to be notified, and other proposals that have not been identified may become more relevant as they go through the legislative process. In all, we identified 50 legislative initiatives and proposals which have the potential to result in a new or replacement EU Act and which could be notified to the committee eventually. I'm going to take you through the Commission Work Programme, highlighting how we identified these initiatives and proposals. So first of all, going to the new initiatives. These cover both legislative and also policy initiatives. I'm going to focus on the new legislative initiatives as they're the most relevant at the moment. So it's often challenging to assess the likelihood of these translating into new and replacement acts, as limited detail was available on the scope and content of these initiatives. A new initiative was considered to be within scope if it related to the general policy areas covered by Annex 2 of the Windsor Framework. 9 new initiatives were identified. 6 of these were considered likely to result in a new replacement act, while 3 were considered to have the potential to result in a new or replacement act. These included, for example, initiatives related to the REACH regulation, which is in Annex 2, and legislation involving decarbonisation, medicines and pharmaceuticals, firearms, and the third omnibus package, which will include proposals relating to product legislation. Full details are available in Appendix 1 of the paper, which is page 29 of your pack. So just a note, we're not ignoring non-legislative initiatives because these initiatives, particularly strategies, are also important to track as they may lead to relevant legislative developments in subsequent years. So turning to evaluation and fitness checks, we identified 11 checks that could have future implications for acts in Annex 2. 5 evaluations reference EU acts currently within Annex 2, such as the Radioactive Waste Directives and LIFTS Directive. A further 6 fitness checks fall within the general policy areas covered by Annex 2 subheadings, and these are in Appendix 2 of the paper, which is page 30 of your pack. In relation to the pending proposals, and as Oren was saying, this is the first work programme of the new mandate, and pending proposals were carried over from the old mandate. Legislative proposals were identified as likely to result in a new or replacement act if they contained a reference to amending or repealing an act in Annex 2, or they referenced the Protocol Windsor framework and associated documentation in the EU's legislative database, that's EURLEX, or they referenced Protocol or Windsor framework in relevant EU or UK explanatory memoranda. Of these proposals, we identified 23 that could result in a new or replacement act. Nearly half of these met at least one of the criteria and had been previously identified by the Executive Office's table that they produced for the committee. The other half met at least one of the criteria but had not been identified previously. This included, for example, a regulation on plant protection and a directive on reducing microplastic pollution, and these are outlined in more detail in Appendix 3 or page 31 to 37 of your pack. A further 7 proposals were considered in scope as they fell within the policy areas within the Annex 2 subheadings, but they did not meet the criteria. However, these proposals may be subject to amendment throughout the legislative process and may still have the potential to result in a new or replacement act. Finally, there were no withdrawals or repeals of note identified that related to EU acts in Annex 2. In conclusion, I'd just like to reiterate that this is not a definitive list and may be subject to change as the acts within the work programme move through the EU legislative process. Regular tracking, however, should identify those that will ultimately result in a new or replacement act. And I hope this information will assist the committee in their scrutiny work in the coming year. And many thanks again, Chair, for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I thank both Glenda and Oren? I think it was a very comprehensive report, and it was really easy to read as well, and how you broke each pieces of the potential EU legislation moving forward. I'm going to open to the floor. Has anyone? Yes.
Yes, please. Thanks,
Steve?
Karen. Team, thank you very much indeed for yet again another excellent piece of work on RAISE. I mean, I'm just going to read it out for the record because obviously people will be listening into this, I hope. But you're identifying 50 initiatives, 9 new initiatives, 11 evaluation and fitness checks, 23 pending proposals, and 7 possible pending proposals, and then anything else that comes along during this forthcoming year to do as the rest of it. And have you seen anything in your research? Are there any particular trends and themes from the specific areas that are within the sort of the European Union's 25 work plan that are likely to be more extending more out from that? Because obviously we're very aware of the discussions that are going across the Atlantic, the issues between the EU and the United States and pressures to do with that. But there's also a whole set of issues on sort of non-tariff barriers that are being discussed at the moment. Have you picked up anything else in your research that might be likely to come through, or is this just the initial scan that you've seen?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your question. That's an interesting question. As far as I'm aware, it's just an initial scan at the moment, and it would be difficult to say what would likely come on the horizon, particularly with the changing situation at the moment. Certainly it's something to monitor, but essentially in relation to overall what we're seeing in terms of trends, there seems to be a move more to simplification of EU law, consolidation of EU law, and I think that you've probably the acts that have come through, many of the acts that have come through already, you've seen that in those acts where there would be a number of proposals that would be consolidated into one regulation, and that seems to be a big thing. There's a big thing towards competitiveness and also reducing the burden on SMEs at the moment. So that seems to be the general sort of thrust of EU law at the moment. I don't know, have you anything to add to that, Oren?
No, I think that's pretty cool.
And with your indulgence, Chair, just another question. I've been informed by some members of the House of Lords Committee, they're looking at a piece of legislation that hasn't been notified to us yet, which wasn't in your brief. Have you had any chance to talk to the House of Lords Library or the House of Commons Library on some of the things that they might be looking at? Because I just noticed it, but I'd been in contact by the House of Lords about two pieces of legislation that's coming through that we haven't been informed of. But I just wonder if you've been able to sort of avail of the House of Lords in their research work, or the House of Commons in their research work as well.
So we haven't had contact with the House of Lords or the House of Commons in their research work. If you have more detail on those acts that are coming up that would potentially be notified, we'd be happy to have a look at them and monitor them. But if you have any more details, that would perhaps be helpful.
And just finally, it is an excellent piece of work, and I think I would like, we should circulate it to all MLAs, because it's a really good primer for what's going on. I mean, thank you for clarity and sort of clear English. You obviously haven't got a career ahead of you in the Northern Ireland Civil Service if you can produce stuff like that, because it actually makes sense. But there we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Any other members? Questions? No? Okay, so thank you, Glenda, and thank you, Oran. And I'll just reiterate again, it was very, very comprehensive, and really appreciate the paper.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So just to advise members as well that they are content that obviously this briefing will be used to inform our preparations for the committee's proposed engagement in Brussels in relation to the Commission work programme moving forward, which we will discuss later on this morning. I would also just ask our members content for this research paper to be shared with both the Executive Office and the British Cabinet Office.
And sorry, Chair, may I make a recommendation that we also share it with all MLAs and they're made aware of it?
Everyone content? Yeah, that's fine. And our members also, yes?
While we're doing that, just checking with TU that any of these new acts are added to their list in terms of of rolling their tracking list.
Yeah, we could
going forward.
We could follow up on that. Yeah.
As in drawing attention to some of those ones that aren't currently listed.
Just to make sure that they're keeping an eye on them as well.
Certainly, yeah, we can do that. It's worth probably noting that a number of those that are listed as not sort of featuring on the TO table at the minute are in that category in the paper of potentially new.
Okay.
We wouldn't ordinarily expect those to be in the TO tracking at this point because there hasn't been any indication from UK government that they will fall within scope. There is, I believe, one proposal on there that is potential replacement, so we can draw attention to that when we're sharing the paper.
No, that's grand.
Just to the Chair, with an indulgence with both of you, I think Ray's have done a really good piece of work. Just because it's not on there, it's not on the TEO's sort of scan. Anyway, if we've identified something that is likely to come, there's nothing wrong with communication saying, like, we've identified this. Why haven't you looked at this? We can pick it up. Why can't they? Or Ray, sorry.
Yeah, well, we're going to share this paper, and particularly in relation, I suppose, the pending proposals, where there was 11, but there was also 12 not. So it's sharing that and raising it with the TEO. So we're content to share both those papers. And you members, are you also content to publish this research paper on our committee's webpage? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to move now on to item 6 on our agenda. And that's a proposal for a directive as regards electric vehicle supply equipment, compressed gas dispensers and electricity, gas and thermal energy meters. And can I refer members to page 38 to 67 of your meeting pack? Can I just remind members that the committee was notified on the 27th of February of a proposed EU directive regarding electric vehicle supply equipment, compressed gas dispensers and electricity, gas and thermal energy meters. I can also just remind members that at its meeting on the 20th of February, as part of its work planning, the committee agreed to request a departmental assessment of impact on this proposal with the return date of the 4th of April. So I'd just like to ask members, are they content that in line with the agreed procedures, legal advice is also requested in order to assist the committee in deciding on whether to monitor the proposal? And if members are content, a session then with the legal advisor and departmental oral evidence would be scheduled for approximately 1 month from now.
Great.
Okay. Thank you. And just to advise members that the committee will consider whether to monitor the proposal once the requested information has been received and these briefings have been held. All right, so I'm just going to move now on to item number 7, and that is a proposal for a regulation on the safety of toys. and I would like to refer members to page 68 to 130 of the meeting pack. Can I just remind members that at our meeting on the 20th of February, as part of our recent work planning exercise, the committee also agreed to request a departmental assessment of impact on this proposal. And again, this was requested with a return date of the 4th of April. However, TEO has advised that departments are unable to provide information on this proposal. They state that in Britain, product safety is the responsibility of the Office of Product Safety and Standards, which sits under the British Department for Business and Trade, and there is no direct counterpart here. So the TEO states that responsibility for product safety here sits instead with our local councils and their consumer protection teams. And that TEO response can be found in full at page 130 of your meeting pack. So on that basis, as a first step, our members consent to write to each of the councils here and request their views on whether it appears likely that applying or not applying the proposed EU Act would have a significant impact specific to the everyday life of communities in the North and in a way that is liable to persist. And then if any information received from the councils could then be used to decide on what are the next steps for the committee to have. Yes, Steve?
Through Chair. Could we also write the Consumer Council as well? That seems a bit sort of wishy-washy coming up from the TEO. Not unexpected, but a bit wishy-washy. I think the Consumer Council might.
Sure, we can do that if members are content. As a bit of context on this, you might recall we recently had our inquiry into liability for defective products.
Yeah.
One of the things we did at that point was write to the Consumer Council. Their response at the time was that product safety sits firmly with councils, and they, in relation to that Act, didn't have any more of a substantive response. But certainly we can add that to the list for completeness.
I mean, I think that sort of, again, through the chair, I think that was, again, a bit of a cop-out from the Consumer Council. The reality is that, you know, these are things that are going to affect people in Northern Ireland. And I'm not saying for one nanosecond that sort of the EU will have lower particular standards, but we do need to check, and there is a particular role to make sure we do that, because we can't be approving something that means that we've either got lower standards for toys that will affect our kids, if that's the case. But anyhow. Just my proposal there, Chair.
So, would members agree? Obviously, we write to councils. There is a proposal from the floor to write to the Consumer Council as well.
Yep.
Is content? Yes, we'll do that. Okay. So, obviously, the letters will be issued then with a request of return date of the 4th of April. So that's just over 3 weeks from now to conclude with the original return date for the other assessments of impacts commissioned after the last meeting. So, as also members also content to write to the British Government to request information on any engagements it has held with councils here on the proposal, and also seek its views on the likely impact of applying or not applying the proposed Act here. Yes? Okay, thank you. So if members are content, this will be issued again, like the others, with our requested return date of the 4th of April. So I'm just going to move on now to item number 8, and that's committee travel. That's the proposed committee visit to Brussels and Westminster. And can I refer members to the Secretariat pages at pages 131 to 139 of our meeting packs? So I'm just going to ask Christopher, our Senior Assistant Clerk, just to speak on this, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so members may recall that back in January the committee agreed to reschedule our proposed committee visit to Brussels until after the UK-EU summit had taken place, and we now know that that's due to take place on the 19th of May. The committee also agreed to postpone our visit to Westminster, which had previously been scheduled for February. Since then, most members have confirmed availability for a visit to Brussels from Tuesday the 3rd until Thursday the 5th of June. And we're now then at this stage seeking agreement from members in relation to 2 points today. The first point is in relation to our proposed shortlist of intended engagements during the visit to Brussels. To remind members, this visit was requested with the purpose of further exploring the Commission's work programme, which we heard a bit about this morning, and facilitating more direct engagement with MEPs. You'll see at paragraph 4 of your paper that we've proposed a shortlist of stakeholders there, which we think would allow for that. In short, the list covers those who would be placed to provide us with useful scene setters, so namely the Office of the NI Executive in Brussels, the permanent representation of Ireland to the EU and the UK mission to the EU, and then a combination of relevant committees in the European Parliament which deal with work relevant to some of those elements of the work programme. And finally then engagement with Irish MEPs, likely as a sort of single roundtable session. I'll turn shortly to our wider logistical options for this trip and also for Westminster. But in the first instance, Chair, I would welcome views from yourself and members on our proposed shortlist.
Just a very quick one. Sorry, more than happy to meet Irish MEPs, but we've met most of them. I'd quite like to speak to other MEPs if we can. Particularly sort of, obviously the sort of key ones, sort of France and Germany, or even the Poles, or even the sort of the Baltics, because that would probably give us a different sort of view. I mean, it's great we can meet with Irish MEPs, but we meet with them all the time. We're in Brussels, we should sort of spread it out, I think, if that's possible.
I would, happy to take others' views on this. I would probably extend that even to, not saying that we shouldn't meet with them, but in terms of the UK mission and the permanent rep for Ireland as well, I think we should probably focus, given that we've had a visit to Brussels not that long ago and met with those bodies. I think actually fit them in, great, but I think priority should be given probably to meeting other relevant MEPs, because that's the bit we didn't do as much of on the previous trip. So it's not, I can understand touching base with them if there's space, and but I don't think that it should be a priority necessarily to do those. I don't know if we're going to hear much different from them than we heard during the last visit.
That's noted, and that's certainly something we can take away if members are content. In terms of that request around sort of wider set of MEPs, would members be content if that's through the sort of proposed vehicle there of engaging with the committees and MEPs who sit on those relevant committees, just to sort of tie us down on the theme? Would that work?
Just through the chair, the other thing is, when you two are across in Brussels this on Sunday and Monday, I mean, if you look at some people who are sort of like-minded, or committees or rest, you get a better feel for how it's changed now, where the new people are in the two of it. So if you could come up with a list, and we'd be more than happy to bring that to committee. We're more than happy with that.
I know we're going to different breakout sessions, but a couple of breakout sessions will be relevant to some of the things that were in the work programme there as well.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, maybe because everything has changed now. There's new people there, there's new MEP, so it'd be a good opportunity for the two of you to suss out some people for us to go and speak to.
Yeah, that's fine. So then our members are content that the meetings are sought, obviously, with the stakeholders identified at paragraph 4 of the Secretariat paper for the Brussels visit, and then likewise myself, obviously, and David, if in our trip to Brussels, if we can identify any others that who we've been speaking with in the workshops that we're in, and then likewise, as I say, through the current, obviously, committees that are there, we'll have an opportunity to meet other MEPs from other countries. Okay, thank you. So just now we just move on. Are you happy enough, Christopher? Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair.
And we'll move on now to the preferred option of the visit to Brussels and Westminster.
Sure. So the second point then that we're seeking a steer from members on is around rescheduling the Westminster visit. Members have already agreed a list of stakeholders to meet with during that visit, and you'll see it there at paragraph 5 of your paper. But then, as I say, the committee then opted to postpone that visit due to reduced availability at the time. With that in mind, we've set out two options in the paper for rescheduling it. Option 1 is to combine it with the trip to Brussels by flying from Belfast to London on the morning of the 2nd of June, undertaking our engagements in Westminster that day, and then taking the Eurostar to Brussels on the following morning. Option 2 would just be to undertake those two visits separately. Option 1 of combining the visits would make more probably efficient use of our travel time and is more cost effective, but it would require members to be away from Monday until Thursday evening. Option 2 would give us a bit more flexibility in terms of that itinerary for Westminster, but it is more costly for the budget. And given that there are quite limited workable slots around the various Westminster recess dates, it would probably mean undertaking those two visits in relatively quick succession, possibly even both within the 1 month. Now, before I pause for members' views on those options, I'm conscious that members will be keen to ensure we're exhausting all sort of options about finding the best value for money on our travel options. With that in mind, it's probably worth noting to members that in preparation of those cost estimates that you see in the paper, we did consider alternative sort of flight and travel options, such as flying via Amsterdam when travelling to Brussels. But the options that you see costed there in the paper were the ones that came in as least expensive and most sort of efficient in terms of the timings. With that said, Chair, I would welcome views from yourself and members on which of those options they would wish to proceed with.
My personal option would be a combined visit to Westminster and Brussels myself, but I'm going to open to the floor. Is there anyone would be in disagreement with that? Or?
No, the only proposal I would do is value for money and the rest of it. If it's the cheapest option, and where we can join our committees by if we're needed for a committee for quorum or something like that, we can join it by video link or Zoom or whatever we happen to be. So my proposal would be we go with option A, and it's the cheapest one, and we do a combined visit.
Anyone else any thoughts? Are they content to go with option 1? Yeah, okay, thank you. So can I refer them members to the draft business case that was set out there on pages 137 to 139 of the meeting pack? So are members content with the draft business case as set out? Yeah, content, thank you.
Through the Chair, did you manage to through the Secretariat team, did you manage to sort the hotels thing out? Remember in Brussels the last time we had this, we were only limited to some strange figure. We weren't.
Is this the price cap on
Yeah.
I think in the business case that we've got there, we're slightly over the cap, but based on just the cost of the accommodation in Brussels. So the business case would then request that we're able to go with the same hotel again.
Yeah, I was just thinking because the hotel I think that the chair and the vice chair are staying at is what the normal one you do for the EU visits, and it actually means that you save, believe it or not, on all the sort of taxi fares and all the things. The rest of it, you can walk everywhere. So it might be in the business case. You might sort of look at that, and it's much more central. And if we're meeting people as well, it tends to work better. But I'll leave that too.
Yes. Thank you, Steve. Can I just advise members that this will be submitted to the Clerk Assistant for consideration, and if approved, the Secretariat will then begin making the travel and accommodation bookings. And just to facilitate that, all members are asked to complete the usual travel forms, which will be provided by the Secretariat after the meeting. So just to ensure the members' details are up to date and correct. Okay, thank you. So we're just going to move on now to item number 9, and that's correspondence. At page 141 of the meeting pack is correspondence from the Secretariat for the independent review of the Windsor Framework on behalf of Lord Murphy, requesting to meet with the committee on Thursday the 20th at 9 a.m. So most members, I believe, have indicated via email that they are content to meet at that time, and the meeting has therefore been confirmed with the Secretariat for the independent review. And obviously diary invites will issue after this meeting to those members who have indicated and are able to attend. So are members content to note? Yep. Okay, thank you. So we'll just move on now to pages 142 to 149 of your meeting pack, which is an explanatory memorandum on a proposal regarding the strengthening of the position of farmers in the food supply chain. I would like to remind members that at our meeting on the 20th of February, the committee decided to monitor this proposed replacement act as it progresses through the EU legislative system. Are members content that the EM is published on the committee's webpage?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just going to move on now to pages 151 to 158 of the meeting pack, which is a copy of the correspondence from the Chair of the House of Lords Scrutiny Committee to the Paymaster General, Nick Thomas Simmons, on veterinary medicines and the Windsor Framework. The correspondence has also been copied to the Minister of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs and the Chair of the Agriculture Committee. Are members content to note?
Yeah.
Yes, David?
Just to put on record, Chair, that we are completely opposed to what we believe is EU interference in this area and the ongoing threat it poses to animal health and welfare. That over half of the medicines come from GB, including sole vaccines for some diseases. So we think that EU interference in that area is particularly unhelpful and we're opposed to it, just to put that on record.
Could associate our party's remarks with that as well. So that goes to the record.
Thank you. We're just going to move on now to item 10, Chairperson's business. I'd just like to remind members that as advised on the 20th of February, both myself and Deputy Chairperson met with the Federation of Small Businesses on Tuesday the 18th of February. So a note of the meeting is included there on page 161 of the pack. I don't have any other business, so I'm just going to move on. Does any other members have any other items of business?
Just
Is
to
it
Chair, just
Louise?
so
Steve?
notice from the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee there was a discussion about the red and green lanes and sort of some quite fairly hefty concerns being raised by the retail, Northern Ireland retail and sort of the major distributors about efficacy and how the REC border isn't working and how it's been counterproductive to trade and the rest of it. I just wonder maybe if the transcript of that could appear in our packs so that we'd be aware for background reading information. I know the committee previously has been incurious about various, or incurious, I should use the correct English, about various issues that are happening. But I think because it's going to have direct relevance to some of the work that Ray's has talked to, maybe if we could have the transcript of that placed in the pack for the members to read in on from the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee.
Yeah.
Sure, can I just come in on that? I mean, we can all look up the minutes of the meeting. I mean, we're capable of finding that information for ourselves, but I don't understand why we would ask the Secretariat team to provide a transcript of a meeting that's publicly available if it was evidence taken in committee.
Thank you, through the Chair. I've made a proposal, so.
Yeah, like, worth noting, we can take the proposal as it sits. Worth noting that I'm assuming it's there on the public record as something that can be accessed, but certainly if that's what the committee decides, we can include it. The work of the committee relates more, as you know, to proposed and published replacement and new EU Act. And the content may not sit within that, but certainly if that's something that's agreed by members, we can take that forward.
David, just one thing.
Am I right in saying it hasn't been unusual in the past with the previous House of Lords committee, though, that we would have those kind of minutes placed within the pack? So I mean, I understand we can look it up, and I understand that discussion. But I think in the past, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that it hasn't been unusual that whenever discussions have taken place at our sort of would you say sort of sister or matching committees in Westminster, that actually the information that has came from them has been in the packs and actually at times has been useful to all members on committee and trying to draw out issues that maybe we hadn't had information on, and I think that's been talked about on committee before. So I don't think, not just with this, but I don't think it's actually unhelpful if there has been specific sessions that draw out some information that those could be highlighted to us in the packs, because I was aware of it from the press and so on, but you'll not always be routinely aware of all sessions that are happening in other parliaments. So we're aware of that. I don't think it would be unhelpful to have that, as has been the case in the past, included within the packs.
Sure. So I believe up to now, generally when those things have been included, it's examples a bit like one of the ones that we had in correspondence today, where the relevant committee has copied us in. And so the correspondence that's there on veterinary medicines, we were copied directly into that, and that's why it's sort of made its way into the pack. And that would be the approach that we have taken up to now on those.
Would it be useful just within our pack saying if there's any additional reading materials that any member would be interested in, maybe at the end of the packs under
Links
reading
or
there could be
whatever.
links to that information even, Steve? Because I'm conscious as we move forward our packs may become really intense. So any additional transcripts within material, if even it was referenced to reading material at the end of our packs. So
That's
if
reasonable.
is that
Thank you.
a reasonable proposal?
Thank you, Chair.
You'd be content with
I
that,
think
Steve?
the other thing, Chair, is that I think the other point I was getting at is that previously the House of Lords has been very good at any of their committees at getting stuff to us. NIAC have been a bit slow. So one of the things I've noticed, if we're having dialogue with the Secretariat, have dialogue with NIAC, maybe improve the sort of the flow of communication from it, because people will be expecting this as a committee to have actually reviewed some of the stuff that they've been doing. It's just an observation.
Yeah, and you'll note from our discussion around travel planning that we proposed to engage with NIAC on that visit, so that's something that could feature in that.
Okay, sorry, Owen, did you want
No,
to
thank you, Chair. And look, I'm not going to push this to a division, but there is a fundamental point here, which is that, first of all, we receive minutes of evidence and reports from other committees where we're copied into those, as has been said. Also, when we are scrutinising a particular EU directive or act that falls within our remit, we will often be copied into the House of Lords scrutiny if they have done scrutiny on that particular act. So already, I think, to be fair to the committee staff, that information where it's relevant is being provided. And I think there's a risk in terms of what's being proposed that we're being copied in on work that other committees are doing, which is about scrutinising the implementation of the Windsor Framework. That is not the remit of this committee. And I think it's important that we respect the role that other committees have to play as part of this process, and that we focus scrupulously on the scrutiny work that we are tasked with. And I think we've seen this time and time again where proposals have been made, often in good faith, but which risk leading us down the garden path to some extent and distracting from where we need to be focusing. The other issue is as well is that we all have research staff of our own, and so I think it's unreasonable to expect the committee staff to be filling that gap whenever we all have researchers and should be doing some of that work independently of this committee as well as part of our wider political work. So it's just to put that on record. I won't force it to a division if others are intent on going down that path, but just to put a word of caution in relation to it.
Okay, thank you, Owen.
Your Chair, I was satisfied with the explanation given as to why, just how we got that information in the past and being copied in. I just recalled some of that information being in the packs and being useful to the remit of the committee. It may well be that there will be sessions that are in part relevant and some parts not relevant and might not feed directly into the rule. When it comes to committee, then people can decide, if it's going beyond the remit of the committee. I don't think it's unhelpful necessarily if there's been discussions relevant to the remit of this committee that we're made aware of them. So I understand what Owen's saying, but I think it does no harm is what I can say.
I think obviously, as Owen has mentioned, obviously we have to keep clear focus on what our role is, and we will have a very busy schedule in the time ahead. I don't think it does any harm if there's any additional links of reading material that a link, if any other members have information, and put it onto the end of our paper regarding additional information, and members can feel free to read that, but not to be included as a transcript within our existing packs. If that would be a proposal that members would be content to move forward with, yes?
Sure, I think that's great. I think maybe just a link with an explainer, maybe 2 lines just to highlight, rather than just have an HTTP link that's just a blue link there that you click through. Maybe like 2 sentences of what that actually is would be useful for members in terms of giving some context to what they're looking at. So yeah, happy with that.
Okay, Christopher, yeah?
Yeah, and maybe just to clarify sort of practically for Secretariat purposes,
Yes.
on the action, would members be content then that if the Secretariat are made aware of links of that nature that are relevant to agenda items, that they're included? Just conscious that otherwise we're maybe sort of in quite a broad-based space on what could or could not be concluded. We have an action point there that we can take forward with NIAC in terms of correspondence. Beyond that, would members be content simply that if a reading link relates to an issue that's already on the agenda for discussion, that's included in the relevant Secretariat paper?
Yes.
Yeah, happy. Happy.
Okay, thank you. So just item number 12, just to inform members that the next meeting of the committee has been scheduled for Thursday, the 27th of March. Yeah. As no notifications have been received this morning. However, obviously, just to remind members that the meeting with Lord Murphy will still take place next week on the morning of the 20th at 9 a.m. Okay, so thank you, and the meeting is now adjourned.
Committee Room 30, Sound.